Good, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Um, we're about to begin this event, and I see. So as the people are logging in, allow me to welcome you on behalf of the ISS and the co-convener of this event, the international, the IUCN, to this event to discuss youth participation and strategies to improve youth inclusion in blue economies in Africa. As a way of introduction, perhaps, for how just to explain how we arrived at this event and this topic. We've been working at the ISS. We've been working on the topic of blue economy for quite a while. We've been cooperating with various partners, including the IUCN, and what we recognized in this time is that a certain trends continue to emerge, which we believe are shaping sort of the future of the development of blue economies in Africa. And we realized and recognized the need to provide adequate policy recommendations to adhere to these trends. And what I'm referring to, just for your information, is well, firstly, what we're expecting is the coastal population will increase. So over the next 20 years, we're expecting that the number of people living by the coast will increase, and that includes, of course, big metropolitan areas, the cities, a lot of capital cities are located on the coast in Africa, but also more generally, we expect that at least 100 million people will be living in the coastal areas by 2030, and that's based on existing evidence and research. So what it means essentially is that there is a need to create jobs, obviously corresponding to the population growth and increase in the population. There is a need to create opportunities. There is a need to provide adequate food security for people. And in response, so what it means essentially, we're expecting that as the population will grow, the consumption of resources will grow accordingly. If you've done any research on blue economy and the state of nature, state of our oceans, you would know that as it is right now, the oceans are overexploited. The resources, the marine resources, are overexploited already. We're dealing with shortages in certain areas when it comes to fish, and the fishing becomes more difficult. So as the population is increasing, and I'm repeating that, we'll also see increased pressure on our oceans and the coastal areas. So that means that we need to adequately prepare for this increase. We need to invest in sustainable solutions. And finally, of course, we also know that Africa is already the youngest continent. So a lot of these, when we're talking about the increase in population, a lot of these, we're essentially we're speaking about young people, and the trend will continue again for the next foreseeable future, for the next 20 to 25 years. So that the nexus of these trends necessitates a conversation about how do we promote youth inclusion in blue economies, sustainable economic activity in the coast. How do we ensure that young people are adequately represented, and how do we how do we address some of the challenges facing young people? And in our research, essentially, when we started conducting research on this topic, we realized that the youth aspect is that missing piece in this broader picture. So without that being said, the idea for this event was essentially to have a conversation, start a discussion, and include various sort of actors, relevant actors and stakeholders in this conversation. And the idea is that following this conversation, we will publish an outcomes report containing recommendations and some of the way forward to capture the discussion today. The structure of this event, we try to structure this event in such a way to promote discussion and conversation. We'll have my colleague, David Willima, making an address, followed by our IUCN colleague, Barka Musaye, who will present on the Great Blue Wall and some of the best practices that has emerged from this very important and unique initiative. I mean, unique not just in Africa, but in the world. There's a lot we can learn from it. And then we will hear from 4 respondents, experts in this field, who will provide their reflections and their ideas and inputs based on their experience and expertise. But before we begin, please allow me to do something very boring, but something very necessary, some technical housekeeping for us. Can I please remind you to keep your cameras off for the duration of this event, and please keep yourself muted. We will have a Q&A after the presentations are done, for this portion of the event, please feel free to raise your hand and you will be acknowledged by the moderator. But also please feel free to engage in the chat function and ask your questions there. With that being said, and again, before we begin, I would also like to play a video from our colleagues from IUCN, from Mr. Thomas Sberna. Thomas is the regional head of the East and Southern African office of the IUCN, and unfortunately he couldn't join us here in person. He's attending a different event, but he recorded a video for us. So please, I'm going to share his video with you for his introductions and sort of for his he will help us shape the conversation.
Apologize, I cannot be there with you live, and I'm sorry about that. Actually, I just arrived in Costa Rica to attend the UN Ocean Conference preparation meeting, which is hosted here by the government. And this is just, a sign on how important increasingly the ocean is in the world of today and tomorrow. And this is probably one of the key reasons why a few years back, together with the partners such as ISS Africa and others, the countries, the government, civil society, we've started developing the Great Blue Wall Initiative. One of the key rationale and reason why we started that is really to sort of focus on the existing solution and really sort of supporting what we call the Blue Guardians, all those people, you included, that, wake up every day fighting the good fight, but they are not yet receiving the level of traction, support, political leadership that is required to enable us to achieve the level of impact and change and transformation to achieve the 2030 targets. Now, of course, while now it is, the initiative is getting an increasing level of traction, of financial commitment and action on the ground are increasingly sort of being delivered. The bottom line is we still have very, very little time to deliver on its level of ambition. 2030 is tomorrow. We're already in 2024. And that's where I think I want us to sort of refocus today. We need the drive, we need the energy, and we need the traction and really sort of the passion to deliver things at an unprecedented scale and unprecedented speed. Now, where do you find at the same time drive, passion, and energy? Well, it's in the youth. There is nowhere else where you'll find all of that all together. And very interestingly, for the past decades, and even more so probably for the past century, we used to talk about sustainability and sort of sustainable development, sustainable ocean economy. Now, let me tell you something. That is kind of true and work when the world was at least thought to be still sort of within the planetary boundaries, right? Sort of the safe operating zone where you think that it's still possible to operate sustainably without sort of doing no harm, basically, right? But that only works when you have a healthy planet that can sustain sustainable activities. Now, the truth is, unfortunately, as you all guys know, we've already overshot 5 or 6 of those planetary boundaries. So now sustainability is just not enough. Now we need to start regenerating our planet. We need to go back within the safe operating zone of the planetary boundaries. And for that, this is why we need, the passion, the drive, the energy of the youth, because to be able to regenerate within the time frame that is left for us to do so, we're going to have to be able to do that, to deliver on ocean action like never before. And we need all hands on deck, right? We need scientists, we need entrepreneurs, we need financiers, we need donors, we need the whole community. And more importantly, we need to make sure that that traction, that momentum keeps on going, because it's not going to be enough to do that today. We're going to have to do that today, tomorrow, in 2030 and beyond. And so that's, for me, having this webinar today is such a critical and very, very opportune and very timely once again, because we want to sort of, create a deliberate space for the youth, for the young generation to be able to engage and really sort of take part, engage, and help deliver, and really sort of even lead some of those action on the ground in particular, but also at international level. I believe today you guys are going to have an amazing discussion. I wish I could hear everything that you guys are going to talk about, and because I know that every single time I talk with you guys, there's just amazing ideas, passion and drive coming out, and kind of reinvigorate even myself. So I once again, I apologize I can't be there, but I just want to sort of first congratulate just for your engagement, your commitment. It really is commendable. It's not something that you should and nobody should take it as a given. And more importantly, maybe it's, I think, this sort of awareness of how important it is to go beyond what one thing is able to do, and sort of be able to dream big, basically. And that's what I think you guys can bring on the table. Those sort of crazy ideas, crazy energy, and we sort of shoot for the moon. We need those ocean shots. We need those sort of out of the box thinking that will enable us to be able to deliver on the level of impact that science is telling us that we need to deliver. And so I just can't encourage you enough to, engage with your peers, with us, with everybody in between, really, so that we can all together deliver on the ambition, the level of action that is required to ultimately save our ocean and save our planet. So once again, I just want to thank you all to be here. Again, I'm really sorry I cannot be there in person, live, but for me it was very, very important to still be able to send a message. And maybe just to leave you with one thought. There is this saying that says that, we should not underestimate the power to change the world of a dedicated small group of people, because indeed it's the only ever thing that ever has changed the world. So don't think that ultimately, it's not possible for a small group of young people to really make a difference. On the contrary, it is the only thing that ever has. So I'm going to leave you with that. And again, I can't thank you enough to be here with us today. I wish you to have great conversation, very constructive exchanges. And I leave you in very good hands with my colleagues and partners. And in the meantime, until then, I wish you all the very best. And I say, having a good day, and thank you so much.
So that was an address recorded by Thomas Sberna from the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, our partners, and I think he did a very good job sort of highlighting some of the issues moving forward, and the fact that we are running out of time, the fact that we are really discussing a nexus of various issues coming together. It's, here at the ISS, we often approach, when it comes to maritime, in this regard, we often approach issues from the standpoint of security and perhaps hard security issues or human security. IUCN, of course, approaches it from the point of conservation, but you can see how moving forward, we can no longer work separately. It needs to be a broad conversation. And so I'm very interested to hear from the two speakers who will, I think, provide sort of the different sides to this conversation. And I would like to invite my colleague, David Willima. Now, David is a maritime researcher here at the ISS. He works on essentially he works on the issues that are at the nexus between maritime security and environment. David will provide some of the key findings and recommendations from the ongoing research on the blue economy and youth inclusion that is currently being undertaken by the ISS. David, you have the floor, and can I please ask you to limit your inputs to maybe 10 minutes or less? Please take the floor.
Thanks, Dennis. Good morning, everyone. Thomas ended on a note where he gave us a saying, and I think I'll keep with the theme and start us off with a Native American saying, which says that we do not borrow the future or the ocean from our ancestors. We do not inherit it from our ancestors, rather, but we borrow it from our children. And so that, for me, speaks to the need to look at this conversation from an intergenerational approach that tells us that ocean resources are really borrowed. We are only using them now, and we should be custodians and leave them safely for the coming generations to also use, because they are the common heritage of humankind. And on that note, I thank you for joining us today. I will stand on protocols already observed by Dennis, and I'll get straight into the conversation, which is basically just providing a broad sweep into the state of the blue economy and youth inclusion in Africa, based on a lot of research that we've been conducting for quite some time now. And so at an AU level, the African Union has its Africa Blue Economy Strategy, which focuses on harnessing Africa's marine resources for economic growth. And at the same time, it has identified certain priority thematic areas, fisheries, shipping, and so on and so forth. And then on the other hand, it also has the AU Youth, Peace and Security agenda. So what we've realized is that while the two conversations are taking place, they are not necessarily speaking to each other to the level that they should be. And this can be seen, for example, in Africa's maritime governance strategies, the Integrated African Maritime Strategy. The African Union, for example, only mentions youth once, and only in respect to their corruptibility. And so that sort of gives you a brief synopsis. And this is quite unfortunate for a continent that on one hand has a growing youth population, like Dennis has alluded to. And this is something we hear every day. It's almost like a song now. But what does it really mean, particularly in the conversation that we're having today? And then on the other hand, if you look at the map of Africa, it sits almost like an island. Not almost, it is an island. And it shows you the importance, geographically speaking, of the maritime sector for the continent. But broadly speaking, the maritime sector and the blue economy in particular is pretty much the lifeblood of our economies, for trade and shipping, but also for food security, job creation, and all those things. And to paint a broad picture, 38 or 55 of our 55 states are coastal states. And they have a combined exclusive economic zone area of 13,000 square kilometers. And that shows you that we have enormous maritime zones. And inland as well, we have vast inland waterways, our lakes, rivers, dams, and all those things. That a lot of them that are transboundary are also the lifeblood for a lot of our communities, providing food security, income, and other avenues. And so Dennis spoke about the need to tie this to themes together. The blue economy, which by definition looks at the sustainable usage of marine resources in order to harmonize the conservation conversation, as well as economic growth, which the continent truly does need. And this is guided by the AU's Blue Economy strategy, which to a large extent is still being localized at regional and national levels. And this is also all headed towards the realization of the goals of Agenda 2063 for inclusive and sustainable development for the continent. And this link between the blue economy youth is still being studied, which is why we embarked on conducting this research in order to really bring this conversation together instead of them happening in isolated frameworks. And so we realized that there are three trends that are primarily interplaying and affecting the development of the blue economy in Africa. The first one being climate change. And this is particularly, I mean, if you follow the news, if you're in the southern part of the continent, there's been a lot of floods in the Durban area, in KZN, and parts of the Eastern Cape, the coastal areas in that regard. But also, we realize that climate change is indeed a fragility amplifier in the sense that it exacerbates already existing issues, security risks and issues on the continent. If you speak about poverty, what does it mean in the context of climate change? If you look at violent extremism, what does it mean? If you look at youth unemployment, what does it mean in the context of climate change? And the continent is disproportionately affected, and especially when you consider that a lot of our largest coastal cities, your Lagos, Abidjan, Casablanca, Cape Town, are low-lying coastal states that are being impacted by sea level rises that is happening at an accelerated rate above the global average. And so how do we prepare our coastal cities in order to advance resilience and also adaptation? And we've seen a lot of these things play out. You have tropical cyclones, Freddy or Storm Daniel in the Mediterranean Sea last year that caused a lot of mass displacements in Libya. And so some of the effects that we're seeing of this are displacement and migration due to loss of habitable land, economic disruptions of traditional blue economy activities such as fishing, tourism, and agriculture sectors, as well as increased vulnerability to natural disasters such as storm surges. And we've seen this in coastal West Africa as well, where because of sea level rises and flooding, the resilience of coastal development isn't really there. And this amplifies a lot of health issues, damage to coastal infrastructure, which causes a lot of risk, poses a lot of risks to economic development, but also a loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services such as mangroves and coral reefs that we know are extremely important, not only to marine ecosystems, but also to human security for coastal communities. And from this in particular, we see that the continent is rising up to an awareness of a lot of these challenges. And last year, in a historic move, we saw the Union of Comoros assuming chairship of the AU, which marked the first time that an island state led the continental union. And so through the chairship of the Union of Comoros, there was a convening of the continent's first interministerial ministerial conference, rather, focused on the blue economy and climate action. And this led to the adoption of the Moroni Declaration, which really anchored oceans at the heart of Africa's climate action agenda and emphasized the need for inclusive and sustainable blue economy development processes that foster micro, small, and medium enterprises, innovation, and tapping into the entrepreneurship to create economic development opportunities for the continent's women, youth, and other vulnerable groups. And this was further reinforced by the adoption of the Nairobi Declaration at last year's inaugural Africa Climate Summit, which we were also very pleased that a lot of partners, ISIS and mostly led by IUCN, we saw oceans really rise to the top of the climate agenda in a way that reinforces the conversation that climate action requires ocean action, and ocean action is indeed climate action. And in the words of Sylvia L., blue is green and green is blue. So that is sort of where we see that we cannot have the blue economy conversation without really looking at the impacts of climate change. And so from there, we move on to a conversation about migration. I've already spoken about how the continent, some of the continent's largest coastal cities are coastal areas. And if you look at in West Africa in particular, a lot of their capital cities are indeed coastal areas. If you speak about Lagos, Abidjan, Luanda, Dar es Salaam in East Africa, Alexandria, and so on and so forth. These are all coastal cities. And in West Africa in particular, population increases in coastal areas is projected to reach 70 to 90 million people by 2060. And this is due largely to coastal development activities such as ports, fisheries, and tourism, which all fall under the umbrella of the blue economy. And so how do we prepare ourselves for such an eventuality, which is already happening? And we're seeing the effects of this through overcrowding, damage to property, and other effects. And as sea level rises continue to be on the increase, a lot of these risks, including pollution, will continue, and it would make the continent, we like talking money and numbers, will be losing a lot of money through the loss of and damage to coastal infrastructure, especially as Dennis alluded to earlier. We're looking at around 116 million Africans. A lot of these will be youths that are projected to live in low-lying coastal areas across the continent. And this is evidence from scientific studies that have been conducted. But in that conversation as well, we are looking and seeking wisdom from our coastal communities that have for centuries been custodians of the ocean, using these resources in a sustainable manner. And now also drawing from that wisdom, and also from our island states, that the existence is facing an existential crisis from the impacts of climate change. And we're seeing a lot of positive migration to the coast due to pull factors such as employment for youth, but also in the context of climate risks, we're seeing in places like Mozambique, coastal Mozambique, where young people are migrating away from the coast, negative migration towards inland areas, avoiding some of the risks that we've already spoken about through tropical cyclones and all of those things, leaving aging communities and populations in those areas that are not productive, and which will leave our coastal areas sort of in an unproductive state. And then, which also speaks to my next point about harnessing the Africa's demographic dividends. where it is only, so we have this surge in our population, but it is only projected that we'll reach our demographic dividend. And our Africa Futures program here at the ISS has done incredible work in providing us with some data on some of these issues, where we will only reach our demographic dividend between 2043 and 2050. And this is basically, in simple terms, it is just a positive ratio between the working age and the elderly population. So for the continent, for example, by in 2043, 34% of the population will be aged below 15 years of age, which is not a working age group. And then only 5.3 will be aged above 65, which is also not a working age. So the middle there will be between 15 and 35, which are youths, and of working age, which is where the continent will be most productive. So the question then for us over here is, how do we harness this potential and prepare our youthful population to tap into this blue economy that we speak about, and largely, at least from the continent, it is still in a very traditional sense, where it is only focused on things like the fishing sector, which when we've spoken to some youths on the ground, there's still a lot of misinformation about how lucrative but also fun that this sector is. They look at, oh, we don't want to be fisher folk because it is frowned upon in most societies. It is seen as dirty work, but we need the innovative thinking, like Thomas spoke about, the adaptability and the competency in digital technology of the youth to really drive this industry to where we envision it to be. And in so doing, we will be addressing the climate crisis, because we will foster resilience of our coastal communities, but also use our marine resources in ways that are sustainable and really have that conservation part of the conversation, but also address challenge socioeconomic issues that the continent desperately needs to address. And so on that note, I am going to end my briefing. I've provided a brief sort of overview of where we are, and I am now excited for the next part, which will look at this amazing, innovative, solution-based initiative that has emerged, and we're going to hear from Barker about more of that and how we can get the youth involved in that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. And I guess you did part of my work linking the two. But yes, without further ado then, Barker Musayev from the IUCN. Barker is a regional regenerative blue economy manager at the IUCN. Before that, she worked as the blue economy advisor to the African Union, and before that served in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mauritius. So she's a seasoned expert, a veteran in this field, and we're looking forward to hearing about the the Great Blue Wall as a very unique, I think, initiative in Africa and globally, and some of the best practices that we can draw from it. Barker, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm wondering if you can see my screen.
We can.
Oh, fantastic. I'm just getting the mechanics of this going. Just bear with me a wee moment. Here we are. Okay, thank you very much to ISS for giving us this opportunity to present the Great Blue Wall initiative. I'll just give a presentation of what it is about. Many of us will have heard about it in different fora, but not really understanding what it might be. And on our side as IUCN, we're really grateful for this platform so that we can actually curate ideas and get feedback on how we can address some of the blind spots that we may have. This is an evolving initiative, and we want all all hands on deck, all minds on deck to make this a success. So just, right, I am not sure how this is working. Okay, right. So just for, right. Okay. So what is the Great Blue Wall Initiative? Essentially, it's an ambitious initiative that we are very proud to call an Africa-born initiative that seeks to connect seascapes across the Western Indian Ocean region. And the idea of seascapes is that these are not just marine protected areas, but actually areas of high ecological and biological significance, areas which have been identified through our studies conducted with our partners in the region that have been deemed to be of high value in terms of biological richness in the marine sphere, critical ecosystems, but also areas that are home to significant coastal communities who are part and parcel of the seascape as well as the solutions that lie within it. And we are, through these seascapes, we are developing what we call a living blue wall of critical ecosystems. And these include seagrass ecosystems, corals, mangroves, wetlands, as well as the people that we seek to connect. So you can see that very at the outset, the Great Blue Wall is a project that is not just in the traditional conservation sense, but also is looking to turn conservation on its head by putting people at the center, at the forefront. It also seeks to not just look at the ecosystems themselves, but create the connectivity and build upon partnerships. And it's also essentially also a political effort as well to bring the region together. So from this graph, you can start to see the different seascapes that have been identified, and you can sort of see the shape of a wall that is taking place, that's starting to take shape. So we have seascapes in Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, in Madagascar, in Comoros, and we are also looking at now activating seascapes in other parts of the region, including in Somalia, in South Africa, Mauritius, Seychelles. And we have also, thank you, by the way, for referring to the very important meeting that Comoros convened last year, which also brought together the island states of Africa. So here you will see two seascapes in the making, which are in Sao Tome and Principe and Cabo Verde. What is also very significant about these seascapes is that the actions that are being taken in the seascapes are at multiple levels. So there are seascape level interventions, which is really grassroots empowerment, as well as seascape level monitoring of the ecosystems, as well as regeneration of the ecosystems that lie there. But the idea is also to bring those voices from seascape level to the national level, to the regional level, and even to international level. At the same time, we are doing the partnerships at not just a horizontal level, that is to say across the seascapes, but also at vertical level. So building the partnerships across the countries at a high level, also curating the voices of the region so that we can add just one more contribution to supporting Africa's priorities and ocean leadership at international level. So as you can see, it's a very multidimensional project. And to dive a little bit deeper in on the different seascapes, you will see that these are the initial areas that have been earmarked in 5 of the countries. And as I mentioned, we are looking to activate the other countries. And these are direct contributions to the 30 by 30 target of protected areas in the marine sphere. We are also very, very keen to start building very deliberately collaborations within a South-South framework, because we recognize that a lot of the narrative around marine conservation and marine biodiversity has to be led by what we call the tropical majority. So with that in mind, we are building actively our collaboration with the Pacific region that we recognize as being sort of the pioneers of the blue economy concept, even if, since 2012, when the concept was first inaugurated, it has evolved to mean a lot of things. But as the original guardians, custodians of the blue economy concept, we are quite deliberate about learning from the Pacific region on principles of blue justice and connectivity. And this is also a prelude to collaborating with countries from more of a Latin American and the Caribbean region as well, to start building that South-South cooperation. And now from a more, how do we actually achieve the different deliverables of the Great Blue Wall? So we have designed the seascapes along 3 key pillars and a transversal one. The first pillar, the Blue Planet pillar, is essentially about enhancing seascape governance. So putting in place the mechanisms to not just establish marine protected areas, locally managed marine areas, but also find ways to integrate local communities, as well as support policymakers on effective conservation measures and MPA management. And a very modest goal that we have is to activate 2 million square kilometers of conserved areas, which will be a direct contribution, again, as I mentioned, to the 30 by 30 target. The second pillar is a Blue Nature pillar, which recognizes and values and identifies our critical ecosystems and fosters nature-based solutions. So with this, we are looking to restore and regenerate 2 million hectares of critical marine and coastal ecosystems. And the third, which I'm very excited about, which is the pillar that I lead, is the Blue People pillar, which is to catalyze a regenerative blue economy and activate and establish the mechanism so that we can have 2 million jobs in the regenerative blue economy sphere. And this pillar really looks at both supporting innovative ideas on the ground, blue ventures, local SMEs, small and medium enterprises, as well as looking at how we can transform economies from a sector perspective and from a more macro level perspective. So these are the 3 pillars of action, and underlying all of this is the transversal pillar, which is on blue partnership, where we seek to connect and collaborate across the region, leverage political momentum, as well as really getting people and different sectors to work together, because we recognize that conservation needs not just, conservationists, but also the private sector, the policymakers, indigenous people and local communities, as well as young people. And when we are looking at young people, we do not subscribe to the idea that young people are the leaders of tomorrow. And I hope I do not hear this term, this sentence during this webinar, because young people are already taking such leadership positions as we speak. And many young people are already, both through activism, through entrepreneurship, and through the different positions that they occupy, leading in many different ways. So these are our pillars of action, and we are now, right, this is something I'm quite excited about. We launched the Great Blue Wall in 2020 at the World Conservation Congress, and we were quite conscious that to be able to give credibility to the Great Blue Wall, we also need to anchor it in different projects, in addition to anchoring it with the different policy-related efforts, as well as the more political dimensions of curating a Great Blue Wall. So I'm quite proud to say that since 2020, we have launched multiple projects which amount to over 50 million US dollars conservatively in terms of project capitalization. So the first is the RECE project, which is very much a feminist lens project that has helped us activate those 5 initial seascapes, and that is directly supporting the different activities under the 3 pillars. The WyoCore project, again, is operating in the 5 initial seascapes, looking to support seagrass very specifically. So seagrass governance, which we have recognized as one ecosystem that merits a lot more attention. The LEAP project looks at enhancing governance as well as engagement with the different seascapes. Island Plus, which is a new project, which and here we welcome Ghaamid, who is one of the Island Plus leads, is a project in all 7 countries, so all 7 small island developing states of Africa, to tackle plastic pollution and marine litter. And finally, we have some smaller initiatives, smaller but more catalytic initiatives to support the ratification of the BBNJ agreement, as well as to support the transformation of economies towards a regenerative one, including with last year's Moroni Declaration. We have been keen to see the announcement of an African high-level panel on regenerative blue economy at heads of state level. So we are now actively considering what kind of policy support we can provide to activate this high-level panel. Here are some pictures from the Moroni meeting that David mentioned and that I picked up in my presentation as well. And why this is significant is because it's also sending a strong signal that the African continent is ready and determined to lead the way on ocean and climate action. So I will not go through these different slides, but I'll share the slide with the organizers. It gives you a bit more detail on the different projects. So with that, I really thank you for your attention on this. Okay, I'll stop sharing this. Yeah, for this presentation. And to conclude, what I would say is the Great Blue Wall really is a project ultimately about collaboration and partnerships. So based on this, I think it's extremely important for us to understand how can we best leverage the ideas of young people. So as we are also in a way of we are almost like still in a starting phase of the project, this is where we need those ideas and inputs. And I look forward to your questions and also your feedback. So over to you, Dennis.
Thank you very much, Barka. And on your point on future use, future leaders on use, in a very similar way, I'm wondering if you have such a large proportion of young people in the society, should we really discuss youth-focused or youth-led initiatives? Should they not be like common sense initiatives? Should we not have a change of conceptualization, about that? But anyway, well, thank you very much. I mean, it's a fascinating scope of this initiative.
Can I quickly jump in on that? Because I feel very passionately about this. It should be common sense. It really should be common sense. But what I've noticed is, unfortunately, even though we've heard so much rhetoric around young people in Africa, the youth dividend, we still do not have the policy architecture that recognizes the contributions that young people can make. When we're talking about, for example, the regenerative blue economy pillar, you will find that many young people don't have access to university labs if they've graduated. Many young people don't have access to facilitated ways of registering businesses. For example, in many countries, social entrepreneurship is not recognized as a business model. So young people either have to apply for traditional business models and then pay the taxes and not benefit from the support. And more importantly, we really have to change the narrative around the fact that many policymakers, and I know because I come from this space, also still view young people from a confrontational aspect. The classic, and from that perspective, not necessarily engage with them. And you see this a lot in different conferences where you'll find delegations from other parts of the world that actively include youth in the delegations. But many young people struggle to even access policymakers in our parts of the world. They struggle to have their ideas recognized. And just yesterday, I was at this, and I will be very brief about this. I was at this showcase of innovative solutions against plastic pollution, where many innovators from the global north were presenting seaweed-based solutions. And I know of young people in our part of the world who are doing exactly the same thing, but they have invested over 5 years in what you would call research and development, but for want of resources, for want of access to a lab, they have not been able to put a product on the market. And the same idea being presented by a young person in another part of the world has now reached maturity and is being celebrated. And it really makes me realize that we have a long way to go. So yeah, it should be common sense, but events such as these are extremely helpful to sort of bring these ideas and these voices to the fore. So thank you for that.
No, thank you, Bark. I mean, as you said, we have a long way to go, but we don't have a lot of time. I mean, the reality is that, Africa is the youngest continent and the trend is continuing. So we really need to reconceptualize, rethink the way we approach this issue. No, but thank you very much for this. I know you might be a bit pressed for time, but I wanted to check if we can perhaps proceed with the respondents. Would you have time for the Q&A? Perfect. And great. So then let me pass to my colleague from the IUCN, Ghaamid Abdulbasat, who is the co-moderator for this event, to take the discussion forward. I think the two presentations did a great job sort of outlining not just the current issues, but the projections, some of the challenges, obstacles, and I mean your inputs right now, Barka, as well. What we need to do, and we have 4 great experts working in the field from different areas who can provide their input. So Ghaamid, I'm passing the floor to you to take this the next session forward, please.
Thanks a lot, Denise. I really appreciate that. So without further ado, by introduction, my name is Ghaamid Abdulbasat, as per the name appearing on the screen. Work for the IUCN as the Regional Oceans Communications Officer. Of course, thank you for covering the first part, and I think more and more has been covered with Thomas together with Bark and my colleagues from IUCN in the connection between the youth and the blue economy, but also all stakeholders being on board in the Great Blue Wall, which was actually a very great insight. Honestly, I'm thankful to the both speakers. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our next respondent. So we will be having 4 of them, and I'll be starting with Sam Hofmeyr from the Youth for MPAs, which stands for Youth for Marine Protected Areas. Welcome, Sam, and you can provide a brief introduction of yourself together with some insights with 10 minutes or less. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I'm just going to start a timer because this conversation has sparked a lot of passion for me, so I'm excited to get into it. So my name is Sam Hofmeyr. I am currently an Ocean Stewards Coordinator for an organization called the Wild Trust under the Wild Oceans Program. But I'm also a member of Youth for MPAs, which is a youth-led organization. I see a hand up. I'm not sure if maybe someone can't hear me.
Ali,
no, please go ahead.
Sure, yeah, we'll have a Q&A afterwards, no worries. Thank you, Ali.
Okay, yeah, so I'm part of Youth for MPAs, which is a youth-led organization that focuses on advocacy with the purpose of fighting for the proclamation and expansion of new and existing MPAs with people at the center. And what I can offer to this conversation is my perspectives on youth advocacy and youth inclusion in conservation. And to do that, I'd really like to tell a little bit of a story. I just would like to see if I can share my slides. I can, so I'm going to put them up. And hopefully you guys will see them in a second. Okay, I think it's in presenter view.
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, so Youth MPAs advocates for proclamation of new and existing MPAs with people at the center. And what the group has done over the last couple of years, they started in 2018, was really advocate for marine conservation in South Africa. So dating back to 2017, we only had 0.5% protection in South Africa's mainland EEZ waters. And Youth MPAs played a big role in advocating for that to become 5%, which we eventually got to in 2019. But we had marches in response to Shell and the mining they wanted to do. We held marches where we deliver letters to the Minister of Environmental Affairs in South Africa stating the demands of the youth. And we also do a lot of work around capacity building for the youth, recognizing that as much as we are worried about the lack of urgency with getting our protection to a level that can sustain biodiversity into the future, we also struggle to have input and know what resources to take use of. As Barker was mentioning, it's so difficult for the young people to be able to have access to the people who do this conservation for not only like on a national level, but globally. It's hard to access the people who do this work, and it's hard to understand the processes. So we really do a lot of workshops based on that. One that was really popular we called What the Fish, which was going through all of the abbreviations, like all the acts, the SDGs, the NEMA Act, all kinds of abbreviations that are used in the conservation space that us as young people really should know about, but don't really understand. And that kind of is the beginning of a very cool story of youth inclusion in the South African space that I'd really like to share with you. So here's some of the advocacy work that we've done, the campaigning for 5% protection in our country, and then here again, just some of the workshops that we've been able to coordinate either as Youth MPAs or our sister organization, Justice for Jaws, very much focusing on building capacity in the young people of South Africa to have a voice in the policy space. For example, on the top right there, we have a spokesperson who spoke to how to advocate for our oceans using social media. And this really started a journey where something I really wanted to point out here is finding champions. So Wild Trust is a champion for Youth MPAs in that they are constantly supporting our activities and making sure that we're included in any conservation events that take place, and helping us form relationships with who would then turn out to be more champions for the group. One of them being Malta Kwatikane, who was the CBD focal point for the South African government, who in conjunction with her, we were able to run a youth consultation with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, who maintains protected areas and conservation for South Africa. And we built a relationship with her and our youth network, which eventually allowed two of us to go with the South African delegation to COP15. And that was important for us because it wasn't just a concern for us is we don't want youth washing, which is a term I wanted to mention when Barker was speaking, is this concept of like, oh, the youth are the leaders, but then there's no depth to that. So what this really provided was an opportunity for us to connect with the South African delegation actually managing conservation implementation in South Africa. So we went to COP, we came back, we were then invited to speak at a sustainable financing for marine protected areas workshop that was attended by NGOs, practitioners, and our government officials. And through that, we met another champion within the department, Dr. Tsepang Mokalela, who is the Chief Director of Biodiversity and Monitoring for South Africa. And she actually put to us the proposal to write a youth action plan for 30 by 30 implementation. And on the slide, you can see us there at the bottom attending South Africa's government-run workshop on 30 by 30 implementation. So what we've been able to establish is a relationship through finding our champions, people within the NGO space and the government space who will connect us to the people in charge of the things we need to be learning and the things we are advocating for and saying we as the youth want to be involved in. And that led to us being able to participate directly in these processes with our government. So it's really just been a great learning curve and a great example of South Africa not only being ready to lead the way for ocean and climate action, but being ready to lead the way for youth inclusion with depth in this space. And from that, we've now formulated a youth cross-cutting subgroup, which takes part in the 30 by 30 implementation process run by our government, in which we have members of all kinds of youth groups that we've formed a network with, and we are devising a youth action plan to facilitate the overarching 30 by 30 implementation plan of our government. And we've done that in partnership with the youth within the department. We've done it with Justice for Jaws, WWF, Sabin, the Ocean Stewards, and now a new addition we're trying to add is Traditional Authority within South Africa. So really trying to grasp all spheres of youth to become part of the process of 30 by 30 implementation and a youth action plan where we've put together what we as the youth think we can contribute. And what's special about this is it's not a document that's going to blow into the wind. Dr. Tsepang Makalela actually has met with us several times to work on our action plan and help it be communicated in a way that flows into her department with the people she works with in the government to facilitate the implementation process. And then along with that, something that we've done is establish a campaign which we have now called 30 by 30 for the under 30s, recognizing what's been spoken by David as well as Barker is the fact that youth make up such a large majority of our population. In South Africa, it's 67%. So if the youth make up 67% of our population, who else are they speaking to if youth is not the major stakeholder in these processes? So that's a campaign that our youth groups have established and that we'd like to run with, especially in trying to action this action plan, which focuses on transparency, making sure the youth know what's going on in government in terms of conservation, and also helping us just build that relationship and having youth effectively participate in these processes, not just, you know, having a seat at the table, but participating in these processes. And basically what I'm trying to say is that as youth, we really need to put our foot forward. And as Barker mentioned, we are already doing that. We already have leaders in the space. But what we also need to do is find champions who are willing to not just say, oh, youth, have a seat at the table, but have a seat at the table and let's help a knowledge exchange happen to allow us to effectively participate in these processes. And I think that's a really strong thing that I just want to put forward is that there are youth who are passionate and who advocate for this, and helping connect these youth groups to champions that can, you know, facilitate a process of effective engagement is really something that needs to be at the forefront of all of this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate it. And that was a very well elaborated, at the same time compacted into something very summarized and also a descriptive one. And yeah, I can definitely see my fellow youth on the move. And it's definitely amazing to see you again moving forward in such a movement to protect the African oceans. I was wondering if Timothy actually had a question to Barker or Sam, because also our speaker, Barker, is jumping up to another call. Oh, I think the hand is now down.
The hand was accidental.
Oh,
Thank you.
sure, no worries, no worries, Tim. And yeah, so what about Ali Mohammed?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that was a question too, to Barker?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Welcome.
Yeah, okay. I wanna just to know how you think to support national action plan for the promotion of the Great Blue Wall. Thank you.
Thank you. Barker is still on the call?
Yes, I am. I've just turned off my video, but I'm still here. Thank you, Ali, for this very important question. So In terms of supporting national action plans, there are different ways that we're going about it. The first is we are engaging with the different governments to establish localized Great Blue Wall chapters. So already from a seascape approach, this gives us an entry point for national level action. But now in the different seascapes, we have steering committees that are being developed, and that would essentially support the National Great Blue Wall action plans. From a broader IUCN perspective, as a conservation organization, we do support what we call the NBISAPs, the National Biodiversity Action Plans. But mostly right now with the Great Blue Wall specifically, the focus is on establishing those national chapters. And then since last year, since the famous Moroni meeting where we brought together different technicians, we're able to get more of a sense of what are some of the different priorities and getting the inputs of countries into the Great Blue Wall strategy more broadly. And from the project perspective, the different projects that I mentioned earlier also allow us to engage with country level action plans on more thematic areas. So for example, with WyoCall, we are getting to understand with the different countries what are their plans with regards to seagrass specifically, and what are the areas where the universities in the different countries need support. So it's both from a overarching Great Blue Wall chapter perspective, but also from a project perspective as well.
Thank you for the elaborative description and the response. And I hope Ali is now getting to understand what is really happening on the country chapter wise and how we can localize the GBW or the Great Blue Wall into the national plans and national levels. Thank you for that. Without further ado, I'll be moving on to the next respondent, which is Cynthia Chingwenya, the program coordinator from Conrad Stiftang and former Africa Youth Ambassador for Peace. Welcome, Cynthia.
To speak. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible. Welcome.
Okay, great.
Cynthia, I believe you're mute.
Good. I was trying to I don't see how to turn on my video. I'm not using my usual equipment, and I can't see where to do that. Okay, there we go. Great. Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And thanks to ISIS for the invitation to join this discussion. I really enjoyed listening to, I think, the different panelists that shared, and particularly Baka and Timothy and David, rather, who reflected on, I think, critical issues within blue governance, the blue economy, but also that apply to peace and security issues on the African continent. You will forgive me if my internet connection is not as great. Like I said, I'm in Senegal for a youth consultation on, again, some of the issues that relates to our discussion today, which is on aligning states or national policies with some of the youth priorities that we need to see. And given that we started off this discussion on adages and anecdotes like David shared, I'll share mine, which I've shared before, which is a story that was told by a Tanzanian politician I met in my region in Mozambique last year, which was retold left an account of the former Tanzanian president, Julius Nyerere. And it was on a very popular or very well-known adage, if you're from the African continent, which is when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. And it's usually used within the context of international politics. And one of the questions that ensued was that, okay, so what happens when elephants are not fighting, or if elephants are playing, for example, and the response is the grass still suffers. And I found it relevant, particularly to the discussion we're having, not just on the blue and green economy, but also in general. How do you strategize and ensure that I think youth, which have been identified as majority in terms of African population, are actually beneficiaries and also co-creators in terms of addressing some of the challenges we're having in terms of sustainability, but also ensuring political commitment to protecting and conserving both our oceans as well as our environments. I will speak to the last part of the topic, which is how do we ensure youth inclusion? I am not a blue economy expert, and I was taking down quite a number of notes when the speakers were speaking, because I also had so much to learn from the presentations. The first one to note, which links to what Baka as well as David spoke about, issues on, I think, political will, political commitment. I think we cannot speak about resolving not just the governance or inclusion challenges on the African continent, but also globally, without speaking about the political will with which we can see through some of the commitments. And last year's Moroni Declaration on ocean conservation, rather, is one of the examples through which we can see some sort of commitment to oceans and also to conservation. So I think a key thing for me, which all presenters spoke to, is issues around political commitment when it comes to resolving not just climate challenges, but also to resolving, I think, inclusion in general. In line with that, in response again to the last part of the topic we're discussing, is we cannot speak about youth inclusion if we don't speak about youth representation. So I think the best way to ensure that youth are included is to actually have African youth themselves being in decision-making spaces and decision-making policies. For example, in discussion of declarations or even enactment of new laws or policies, we actually need African youth being represented in such discussions, not only because they form part of the majority of the African continent, and cases like the Gambia, which is over 50%, but because they actually bring in some skills. If there was any silver lining from the COVID-19 pandemic, it was, I think, seeing some of the innovativeness that came out of that, with other young people creating labs for themselves, others creating digital platforms where people started to trade and buy, and so forth. So we actually see that conversations around inclusion is not just in terms of demographics, but also in terms of I think the skills and the know-how that governments and other actors are not tapping into because of, I think, concerns or mistrust that usually go into the youth populace. In addition to political will and governance, this year was declared as a year of education by the African Union, which is an organization I was affiliated to in the past 2.5 years. In addition to my work at CAS. And I think the role of education is important in terms of just creating a population that is not just sensitized to economic and political, socio-economic issues, but also creating a population that is solution-oriented. So there are, I think, general skills that could be tapped into if people actually know and they're sensitized to issues around conservation. Linked to that are issues around language, and I think the lingo which we use in discussing the blue economy, the green economy, or even climate positive growth in general. When I am Zimbabwean by birth and origin, and when I visit our rural home, sometimes you find people speaking about, oh, this stream hasn't dried in the past 20 years. We've relocated in this area, but for this year or these coming years, the streams has dried up. Or now we have to go and feed, the cattle have to go and drink water from a further stream because the one that people usually use has dried up. So it is not that the conversations are not happening or the conversations are leaving people behind. And I like what Baka said, that people are already engaged. So I think the concept of empowering connotes something external, but these are people that are already engaged. These are lived realities. Where I think fisheries have even contributed along the Zambezi to some of the conflicts because people are fighting over fish. So it is not a matter of taking in a new agenda to them or a new discussion to them, but rather seeing how we can sort of integrate certain languages into the discussions we have so that we have as broad and diverse perspectives as we possibly can. So in addition to political commitment, the role of education, and also harnessing, I think, the experiences that youth have and the innovativeness beyond demographics and issues around populations. I think the final one is to just re-emphasize again the use of technologies in responding to some of the challenges that we have. In as much as there are shortcomings and challenges we've seen in terms of youth inclusion, I think there are also some positives, which include, for example, if you look at some of the countries we have engaged, especially in my capacity with the African Union, you see some sort of changes in the Southern Africa region. For example, there was an interministerial meeting on peace and security in 2022, which the ISS was part of the sponsors and participants. And we can see that although traditionally these are some of the issues that did not take priority, I think research and outputs from organizations like yourselves have really, I think, made an impact in terms of directing policy discussions. And a key, perhaps, what we would want to see from there is the implementation. And again, that goes back to the different branches of government. Many times, and my first point, which is on political will, because many times we engage directors or ministers when it comes to the interministerial, and Baka also spoke to, do they have access? But we also need to come down and say, when it comes to government level, the implementers, actors at local or regional government, do they also have the know-how? Because sometimes we then have sort of political will commitment from sort of ministers or directors, but the people on the ground who should sort of implement or sensitize or ensure that education is fit for contemporary challenges, they are not aware of some of the discussions we're having here. So that trickle-down effect, and I think young people are better positioned to actually run with some of the concerns, both at grassroots level, but also take it up when they have space in policy and decision-making spaces. So I think those are my 4 reflections, which is on political commitment, which is on education, harnessing the lived experiences and expertise of young people, as well as I think, which also links to issues around languaging when we're discussing conservation and when we're discussing climate positive growth. And then finally, I think for me, it would be key to ensure that there are as diverse stakeholders that are included, both at national, at regional, as well as national levels. I think those are my reflections for now, and I'll be happy to engage if there are any questions or comments. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I really appreciate that. And we honestly do appreciate the insight you provided. Of course, you spoke about the 4 points that you've mentioned. And yeah, to me, of course, it's the youth being in power. And the moment you mentioned about the language, you actually touched my own work on storytelling and impact communications, which now brings me into a bigger task of understanding the translation of these emerging opportunities in the blue economy space, or even in the green space, to be more authentic in the African economy. But yeah, the moment you also mentioned about the elephants, of course, I'm a Tanzanian as well. I'm also acquainted to the statement or to the quote. And yeah, with the elephants fighting and the grass being the ones affected, it keeps me questioning, and I'm sure it's also a question to all of us here on the call. Is it who's the grass now? Is it the people? Is it the young people? Is it the next generation? Is it the ones that we actually giving them the foundation for them to be actually, fighting on that table or that ground over there? But anyways, yeah, that was a fantastic insight, and I'm looking forward to have you in the Q&A session, and I'm sure we're gonna have some amazing questions and comments from your presentation together with Sam's as well. Moving on to the next speaker without further ado is Stella Mbabazi. Stella is from the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. Stella, you are welcome on the stage to provide your insights.
Thank you very much, Ghaamid, for the floor. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or wherever you are. Like Ghaamid has introduced me, I am from the Common Market for East and Southern Africa. I am the blue economy expert for the region. And I also wish to note that the blue economy nature right in Comesa region is actually still at almost its inception stage. We have got our blue economy strategy that was developed, and right now we are in the implementation stage of the blue economy strategy. Just to give you a small overview about the Comesa region, it is a 21 member state regional economic bloc. And of course, it is a home of Africa's most important fisheries resources, of which these include the marine resources in the West Indian Ocean area, South Atlantic, Mediterranean, Red Sea, as well as the vast freshwater systems of the Nile, Congo, and Zambezi basins, and of course the African Great Lakes, which really play a very fundamental role, especially when you look at the livelihoods of the different people that really benefit from them. Of course, the region
Colleagues, I believe we might have lost Stella. It seems that.
Yeah, and actually I thought it was on my side, and I was still waiting actually for your input. So then what's your suggestion? Are we moving to the next speaker, or we can provide a minute to Cynthia, to Stella to get back?
I think seeing as she's not responding, unless she's in. I think we can move to the next speaker and then give the floor back to her.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we can now move forward to our next speaker, who is Dr. Madeline Nyiratuza, the Regional Technical Advisor for Water, Oceans, Ecosystems, and Biodiversity in Africa at the UNDP, United Nations Development Program. Welcome, Dr. Madeline.
Thank you so much, Ghaamid. I'm very happy to be joining you. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for choosing this important topic. Blue economy presents a lot of challenges, but also provides many opportunities for economic development, cooperation, and security. It is very critical for Africa to ensure that environment protection and development initiatives are driven by the youth that makes up more than 60% of the continent population. So previous speakers talked more about it loudly, and I'll not spend more time talking about the importance of young people for the continent development. Across Africa and other developing regions, Blue economy is challenged by poor governance of oceans, mainly caused by limited cooperation between coastal states and seas, fragmented institutional arrangements that create conflicts between the blue economy sector and other sectors, limited operational and technical capacity of governments and ocean conventions, and trusted to manage common interests of member states for sustainable management of large marine ecosystems and biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions, lack of data for evidence-based decision-making, and lack of adequate financial resources to start new initiatives or sustain achievements, including significant youth and women engagement. David talked much about the impact of climate change on the blue economy, including increasing society's food insecurity. I will not come back to it. There is now a greater need than ever before for coastal countries and small island developing states to join forces to improve the conservation of marine and coastal biodiversity that is very important for sustainable blue economy transformation. UNDP participated in the development of the Moroni Declaration, which is a good vehicle that would be used to involve youth further in blue economy in Africa. In terms of interventions, UNDP supports blue economy transformation in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Asia, and Eastern Europe through strengthening the capacity of governments and ocean conventions to create an enabling environment for common interest, domesticating regional blue economy strategies, and creating platforms for knowledge management, among others. For instance, in Africa, under programs implemented by UNEP and the Nairobi Convention Secretariat, the Bengal Current Convention Secretariat, African Small Island Developing States, and now the African Union Commission, UNDP is supporting blue economy coordination at regional level, and at national level, it is supporting different countries to develop national blue economy strategies and localized interventions on sustainable fisheries, ecotourism development, and regional integration, especially for small island developing states to benefit from the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. All UNDP interventions ensure that assistance provided reaches youth and the most vulnerable, such as poor communities, indigenous people, and women. Also, UNDP supported the creation of the well-known Youth Connect Africa initiative that brings together young people from across the continent every year to discuss challenges and opportunities. I'm confident that this platform and more of this kind would help different actors in the blue economy to increase young people participation in different initiatives. Young people also need to play their part by creating effective networks that facilitate the inclusion. Let me end by reiterating UNDP commitment to working with a wide range of partners to increase youth engagement to accelerate blue economy transformation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Madeline. We are honored to have you also in this conversation, and thank you for the amazing input. Just takeaways from your speech or your presentation is basically the way UNDP is committed to the young people and especially this sector, and we are interested in actually learning more about how the young people can actually be on the roadmap of the UNDP and in partnership with the moderators of this session to see how best we can actually achieve the goals of youth engagement into the your programs and our programs into the blue economy strategy. And I'm sure during the Q&A, the youth will be very much interested. And it's, as you say, the UNDP has its task, but also the young people have their own task to actually commit themselves to the action. And now I'm getting back to Stella Mbabazi, our blue economy expert from COMESA, to get back to proceed with her presentation. Welcome.
Yeah, please forgive my going off. We are having issues, I think, of electricity in Zambia, and we are partly affected, and that is because, of course, the blue resources are going down. If you've really gone over the Zambezi River, that is really a very big energy resource for our countries, especially down in the SADC region. We're having issues with that. Anyway, please allow me then go back to reflecting on the presentations of from David and Baka. Of course, David made a very good presentation. Of course, just like Dr. Madeleine has said, presenting about the challenges, but then also looking at the trends, of course, that are affecting the development of blue economy, emphasizing climate change, which is really very, very significant if we are to develop our blue resources sustainably. But then also, he also talked about the migration levels, which are seeing a number of youth migrating to the coastal areas. And this, of course, brings a challenge of how do we harness the skills and opportunities that this particular challenge brings to us. And then when I go to the presentation made by Baka, I need to also look at when she talks about the different, of course, seascapes and the different levels, how is the youth inclusion done in there? And we also look at how to bring on board the different stakeholders. Of course, looking at that much of these innovations are happening in the marine spaces, but not in the land-linked areas. I think it would be very important that we could also think about it. But then I had a very enticing and good feedback from the Youth for MPS. And of course, then it brings me to the implementation of the Blue Economy Strategy by the COMESA region. I think most importantly, as COMESA, we look forward to, of course, engaging youth in the implementation of our Blue Economy Strategy. We've supported, of course, our member states to come up with their national Blue Economy Strategy, but we highly encourage the youth to come up with strong networks and pressure groups that can, of course, bring on board the views of the different, the views of the youth to these different fora, especially when you look at, of course, the regional economic communities and at national level. These networks play a very fundamental role if we are to ensure that their views of youth inclusion is fundamentally considered during the development of the blue economy. And also we at COMESA, we look at, of course, fostering research action innovations, and much of these are done by youth. So it is one of the areas that we can harness when we are looking at youth inclusion in blue economy development. We need to look at leveraging on the collaborations and, of course, partnerships that are existent in our region, not only in the COMESA region, but then also in the African continent. And of course, we are looking at when even we go at international levels. For example, UNDP is running the IOC challenges, that is the Indian Ocean challenges, which are very fundamental. And of course, youth can leverage on some of these, different programs. So by building collaborations and partnerships, it's very important. But then also when you look at the Moroni Declaration and of course other declarations and of course the Nairobi Convention, they offer opportunities for youth to be involved in the blue economy development. So looking at the customization, the networks, the collaborations, and of course the innovations, the research to action innovations will play a very fundamental role in bringing on board the youth. So I think as COMESA, I'll stop from there. We are very open to engaging with the youth, but then we are looking at a holistic approach whereby we are looking not only on the marine sections, that is the oceans, the seas, but then we are also looking at inland development, because you find that much of the resources that are coming from the oceans and the seas are coming from sectors like small-scale fisheries. So as COMESA, we are committed and we are looking at building collaborations and networking with different youth and different stakeholders to ensure that we engage the youth during the implementation of our Blue Economy Strategy. I think I'll stop from there for now.
Thank you, Stella, and for a very descriptive presentation, and also connecting the dots from the previous speakers as well on the best ways that we can actually harmonize the partnership, and best way that we can actually work together. And with the respondents, that was actually our fourth and final respondent, and we'll be now moving forward to a Q&A session. So I'll be welcoming colleagues and participants to be able to actually ask either written questions or being able to be given a platform to unmute your mic and actually ask and pose a specific question to any of the speakers and the respondents. Yeah, there's again Naidu. You're welcome.
Hello, Ghaamid. Hello, everybody. And easily the oldest person on this call, I feel like a spy on the youth. Just a few thoughts. The first one's going to make me a bit unpopular with you. The youth of my generation did not wait for invitations. And in the nature of revolutions, and what we need is a revolution, one does not wait for invitations. One demands this space. And the story of my generation in the 1980s in South Africa tells you what is possible. So I want to really encourage you to be a little less polite to the older generation and take charge, because you are already leaders. That is absolutely true. And I think it's important that you get other people to understand that really quickly. Having said that, I'm really inspired by what I heard this morning. It sounds like you have a very good grasp of the issues, a better grasp than most of the people in the decision-making spaces. What you need, maybe, is a stronger partnership so that their voices are heard much more loudly, not only in the regular spaces, and the regular spaces are important, but also create the spaces that will become more important as we go forward around this kind of decision-making. On the content issues, I want to highlight four things, if I may. The first issue, and you've talked about this already, but we have to be much more robust around engaging the idea of a new blue economy that will actually help us realize this demographic dividend that this continent has, or potentially can have. And the reason I say new is because the idea of the blue economy is not a new one. You will know this. And some of the strategies that are currently in play are not only dated, but possibly even dangerous. So the first master plan that South Africa developed, economic master plan, is in fact the Blue Economy Master Plan. And the Blue Economy Master Plan lays a lot of its bets on the hydrocarbon potential of the blue economy. And clearly, in a world ravaged by climate change, this is not a direction in which we must go. So the issues that Baka raised around the current strategy, using a conservation approach as the lens going in, I think becomes really, really important. But there are a few things about that really need to find the right kind of resonance. The first is that the economic potential of the new strategy must be highly visible. Now, South Africa, some of you will know, at its Biodiversity in Daba, recently launched the Biodiversity Economic Strategy. Now, it's a document that's involved pretty energetic discussion on both sides of it. But one of the fundamental realities is that the sustainability of the conservation agenda, and we badly need the conservation agenda because our ecosystem really needs to be ramped up to a higher level of integrity to deal with climate change. The sustainability formula depends on whether or not people can get economic benefit out of it. The next point I want to put on your radar is that the need to bring together the UNFCCC and the CBD and the Desertification Convention is really critical. It is far too problematic that in every one of our national systems, and definitely in our sub-regional and regional systems, we continue to engage these separately, even when it's the same ministries involved in leading both of them. This is something we have to do a lot more about. And your innovations are going to be quite critical inside this space. The last point I want to make is that all of this has a security dimension. And this is one of the reasons why the ISS wants to invest a lot more inside this domain. The reality is that the ocean space and the coastal space is a space that is a geopolitical theater of conflict. It has traditionally been, and there's no reason why it would change going into the future. And we have a multiple challenge. The first of those challenges is the mere survival within the planetary boundaries, and we have indeed exceeded at least 6 of them. One of them is having a controversial discussion about whether or not it's in or out, and that's water. But secondly, in the way we engage the issues of a transition to a low carbon economy, it's an entirely new theater of warfare. And one of the fights that are going to go into the oceans, and it probably is there already, is the issue of critical minerals. So there's a multi-dimensional crisis that is at play currently. And I think you're thinking about things in the right way, and we'd really like to help you to develop that thinking a lot further into concrete strategies that one plays into the existing structures and algorithms of decision making, but really encouraging you to organize, to develop your own that contest these existing platforms. Ghaamid, thanks for the chance to say a few words.
No, thanks to you, Des, for providing actually a multi-contextual information to actually our participants and our attendees in this call. Yeah, we actually had it in my notes as well. And one important point that I actually took was for us not being very, very light and soft to you guys. And so, yeah, we have to be tough enough because we are actually the leaders. And this is called to the young people and all, the young people who are actually in the sector, but also capability and that actually they're able to bring change in their own local communities, national and international ones. And I will now love to also invite other colleagues in the call that actually have questions inside. We also have an evaluation poll that actually popped up into your screen. I hope all of us actually got it. The poll will actually be able to help us present better events in the future and understand also the demographics of the attendees that we have in the webinar today. I'm checking if there are any questions on the text, and I'm also looking forward to see if anybody else is interested in actually providing more questions and insights, comments. And of course, we are thankful to the series of speakers that actually went linking each other's speeches and presentations and seeing how actually this is basically one circle, and the center of it is actually economy, and breaking it down to a blue economy, and all of us revolving into the same circumference and the same center. And absolutely, the presentations will be shared by our colleagues from the ISS. Also, there's actually from our part of the IUCN, we're looking forward to see how Dr. Madeline, especially from the UNDP, to see for the coming African Union week, is it the Blue Week coming up? We're looking forward to see how best we can strategize in partnership the way youth can actually be inclusive in that plan, and see how best we can work together. And I'm hearing it's coming up very, very soon. Yeah, we have a question from Faith, or is it a comment, saying, do you think we are missing a come together step the youth talk of not reaching policymakers, while policymakers speak of available spaces and they're ready to engage. Now where are we going wrong and not actually engaging? Yes, Des, you want to go first, or any other speaker who is actually very, very much interested to respond to this? We have Cynthia, we have Sam, we have Dr. Madeline, we have Stella, we have David, Barker. Yeah, Sam, welcome.
Thank you. I think the only insight I can really offer here is that's pretty much a conversation we had with the government officials once we had the opportunity to speak an event, and at that event I said we need proper youth inclusion that involves us being educated to participate, and then, you know, proper participation. And that's what they said. They said, well, we'd love to have you give your insights, and we'd love to have you come and tell us what the youth want to do. And that conversation kind of went, well, we don't know what we want to do, because we don't really understand what you guys do. We just obviously care about the environment and care that there's a lack of urgency and a lack of political will. And that is exactly what happened. We had to have a form of coming together where the department's officials were willing to sit with us in a Zoom room and hear what our thoughts were on what we as the youth can participate in, and then have them also feedback into helping us develop that into something that, you know, is in the language of our environmental managers. So it definitely is a coming together, and I hate when people say, oh, we need the youth involved, but there's no strategy for how to get the youth effectively engaging. So it's not just about coming to the table, it's about coming to the table and seeing what the youth are capable of and where their skills need uplifting those skills so that they can sit at the table and actually contribute. So as much as they say, we have seats available for youth, there has to be a step where it's, you know, a knowledge exchange is allowed to happen, because we can sit at the table with big eyes and quiet mouths if we don't know what's happening, or like how we can effectively engage, or feel that we, you know, our impacts and our knowledge is actually being useful. Because there's also been times where we've been involved in engagements where it's clearly just like a youth washing, I like to say, where, you know, the youth are invited, but they don't actually care what we have to say. So it's very much a coming together, and it's the responsibility of both parties to ensure accountability to the other party to make sure that it's actually effective engagement.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. It's a two-way responsibility, correct? Empowerment happens on both the youth side and of course, the other counterpart who are actually the supporters of what we do, and the mentors, of course. Thank you so much for that. Now we have Dr. Madeleine also coming in.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I wanted to emphasize on the idea shared by the previous speaker from South Africa, who was saying that it's very important for young people to take the responsibility of driving the change that would benefit them, especially in Africa. And I agree that it's very important that young people come together. I think that step is missing at some point in some areas, to ensure that they have one negotiating voice for what they want from policymakers. So if we want to get something, for instance, that will benefit young people on blue economy transformation in a certain country or across the continent, how we as young people want it to happen. It wouldn't be enough if policymakers or development partners such as UNDP and others, IUCN, sit and say, okay, we are going to develop a certain program. How do we make sure that we have a strategy to involve young people in its implementation? There is one conference I attended where young people are saying, there is nothing for us without us participating in its development. I think that slogan is very important. If you are participating in creating something that you want, and then take it forward to wherever you want to support you to realize it or to make it happen, then it can be easily and quickly understood and implemented by different actors that would support young people in blue economy transformation. So I encourage young people to really create different networks, to define their needs, and then to have one voice for them to negotiate the participation in different initiatives. And then there is a second question from Grace, who is asking about how can the private sector incentivize young people to assess and measure the impact of ocean conservation and marine diversity. When I look at something around assessment and research, I'm not sure if it is really the area that would interest the private sector actors much to invest their money in. Private sector actors look at investment, look at making money and doing business. So I think maybe organizations like UNDP, IUCN, and others, and the governments might be the right ones to support on assessments and research, while I would encourage young people to participate more in blue economy, which is business oriented. So studies are okay. You need quick assessments to understand what is existing, what are the issues, to make sure that any business you develop can be viable. But if you want to partner with the private sector, then think about business, think about investment. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Madeline, and that was very elaborative as well for us to understand. And we are indeed also looking forward to see how young people can actually be involved in the Blue Economy Week coming up very soon. On to the next one. I'll go with David. Then Ghaamid come next.
Ghaamid, very quickly, just to add on to what Dr. Madeline said, the issue that we have is not innovation or a lack of ideas. At least from where I am standing, if you go on the ground, young people are thinking, young people are innovating, and there are so many projects going on. The issue that we have at different levels of governance on the continent is we often use the term sea blindness. And it sounds like such a cliche in this moment, but it is a state of affairs on our continent, sadly, that ocean affairs, ocean governance, maritime security, blue economy are not given the sort of level of prioritization that they require, even though continued research and studies and some of the work that we do continues to show that the ocean sector in general has so much transformative potential, even when you link it to other SDGs. SDG 14 remains the least funded SDG, and ocean-based finance is only a percentage, less than 1% of overall climate finance. And this is a global trend. So what we need also is to ensure that we put these perspectives in governance processes on the continent, that national GDPs make allocations for blue economy activities and so on and so forth, that the climate conversation is not happening outside of the blue economy conversation and vice versa. I think only then will we have a sort of this coming together of the public and private sector in order to really fund these initiatives. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for the important statistics that I actually provided. We are moving to the next comment. Ghaamid, am I pronouncing it right? Okay.
Hi, Ghaamid. It's Gaurelo. So I also just wanted to share my 2 cents as a young person speaking to young people. I think that the first thing that is critical to remember is that our youth revolution cannot look like it looked for the older generation. We're also diverse. We all come from different spaces. It's critical for us to sit down together and look at ways in which we can leverage our different positions and also look to how we can disrupt. I do agree. It's important for us to disrupt the current barriers that exist in terms of allowing us to participate, whether it be in decision making or in any other space that you see imperative to join. I think it's critical to question the status quo and disrupt. The second thing is having had experience being in negotiating rooms with governments and that kind of thing. We speak a lot about tokenism and youth washing, but I think we need to look at, yes, if you have one foot in the room, look at how you can leverage that opportunity to allow you to have further to further your opportunities within the space, whether it be by networking, forming partnerships with the people that you are around. That is how you push for meaningful involvement. So while it is critical for governments to include us in these spaces, but we should also reflect as young people, how do we actually leverage from those opportunities? And how do we make those opportunities sustainable for our careers, to enhance our efforts in the space? But the other thing as well is we need to learn how to create meaningful partnerships with either it be civil society, private sector, any stakeholders, because a meaningful youth revolution cannot be, it cannot exist without meaningful collaborations and partnerships. The other thing as well is that with youth participation, we have to keep ourselves accountable as young people. So working together, because I feel like most of us are working in silos. So how do we make sure that we combine efforts, whether it be, young people in academia, young people in different spaces? How do we combine efforts? Because working alone it's not sustainable. So yeah, those are the main points that I had to add. But I'm also keen to engage with everyone else in the comments.
Thank you, Gaugelo. That was a very interesting point of view that you provided, and we took note, and I'm sure the participants did as well. Off to Ali Mohammed.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to just add something first, because I understand that sometimes when young people request from partners to receive support and organize activity, sometimes it's hard because the partner
I believe you're muted.
You're muted, Ali.
Oh, sorry. I say sometimes young people or civil society organization can require the support to organize activity to engage young people. But some organizations refused because government are not behind. And we forget that sometimes in our African government, we can find some director, some minister, some responsible who nominated there, but this is not his issue. I mean, he don't care about what the young people ask. He don't care about what civil society ask to mobilize people and organize activities. So sometimes we young people, we take action without work with the government member states. and we engage them in the community. And at the end of the activity, those people from the government see that this is a good initiative that must be supported. So what I want to say in blue economy, I work with many young people in Seychelles, Mauritius, Madagascar, Mozambique, and other African island state. And I can tell you that the young people of Indian Ocean and Australia or African island state are very engaged in the blue economy activity. So what I want to share is to see the issue and how we can sensitize our government member state through the civil society organization and young people. That means trust the young people, trust the civil society organization, and support civil society organization. They can be our ambassador in front of the government of international organization. I tell you that because I ran away in Indian Ocean country, in the African country, and we face the same problem. But I think blue economy can be this is a peace strategy sectors, because both of us we live because of blue economy. From Indian Ocean country and African island state, and even around the world, blue economy, this is a good and a great sector to create job for young people and to support private sector and to bring peace in our country. So just to congratulate the organizer of this event and tell you that we continue to invest, to innovate, to mobilize, and to engage young people in the blue economy activities. So please support us, join us, and don't hesitate, because we know that the government of Africa, government of our country support the blue economic initiative. And with your support, with your counsel, with your advice, we can move forward and doing something great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Ali Mohammed. Thank you for the youth inclusion perspective in this. And I'm seeing also a comment from Sam at the same time. Indeed, youth are the partners in the process of conservation, and governments are not the enemy of the progress. Collaboration is actually needed between the two. And we're moving on to the last comment of the webinar from our very own respondent, Cynthia Chingwenye. Welcome, Cynthia. Cynthia? Cynthia, can you hear us?
Can you? Yes. Can you hear me? Oh, great. I think a quick one from my end was just maybe responding briefly to what some of the panelists said, and particularly when it comes to issues around governance and funding. In my work with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, I do also work with I think a big part of the work that we do is on funding, and I just want to maybe encourage you and say, actually, when we look at the blue economy or the green economy, be able to link it to some of the pressing issues of our time. And that is issues around peace and security. I think we cannot speak about trade or business for the private sector without speaking about peace and security in the environment in which they have to do business, right? If you look at trade along the Gulf of Aden or even along the Somali route, that is not as lucrative because of security threats. So it's not really that the private sector cannot invest in some of the youth initiatives. They also do have corporate social responsibility, but it's also the framing in which we request for some of the grants or financial support. If you look at organizations like the World Bank, AFDB, or even more recently, Visa held a conference which brought together different artists from the African continent. So what I want to press on is, I think, the cross-sectionality of the issues that we're dealing with, and ensuring that the blue economy is not just relevant for ocean states and countries, but even the land-linked countries must take a part in some of the discussions we're having, because it's everyone's business. So the ability to link whatever work we're doing within the workspace to the broader issues. And then there was a comment from one of the gentlemen, and it reminded me of Frans Fanon's saying, which is each generation must, with relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfilled or betrayed. And I think that's important, and it's a very fair reflection to say we shouldn't wait to be given a chance to sit at the table. While that may be true, I think we also need to also contextualize it in terms of the governance challenges we're having. I think in the current sort of international or even African context within the Sahel region, we're looking at issues around defectors or participation in invented spaces where people no longer actually believe in governance structures, where youth are withdrawing from voting. Those are governance challenges that states do not have an option but need to address. And I think if we sort of bring it to the discussion we're having now, it is to actually say, if room is not being created or a seat is not being created at the table, states need to do that. I think it's for the country's own preservation, but also their international and regional obligations that actually require them to do so. And young people need to be able to play a role in being a vanguard of our democracies and ensuring accountability rather in the different countries that we have. So the private sector does have a role, and I think blue and green economy is part of peace and security solutions, and if not address peace and security threats. And the private sector should take a stake in that because it matters for their business too. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Cynthia, and that was very strong and very powerful as well. The way you have actually mentioned on the best way that we can actually have a seat on the table, and without a seat, then what will you be speaking about without the future generation or the current one or the current leaders? Then and speaking of peace and security in the blue economy, this is definitely a sector that is not actually need to be linked, or if it hasn't, then it has to be, it has to be proceedingly linked. Then we are looking forward to have a sort of a keynote and a closing remark from actually Timothy Walker from the ISS, who is the maritime project leader and a senior researcher at the ISS. He leads a project that aims to strengthen African maritime security institutions, and I'm sure it's going to be a very topic of interest when he is closing when he's providing a closing remark. Welcome, team.
Thank you, Ghaamid, and thank you everybody for giving me some time at the end of today's conversation to provide some thoughts and wrapping up. Quite similar to what Des said earlier, I do think, though, you probably want to hear as little from me as possible, because I'm sadly now on that part of the age line where I kind of raise the average age of the room. So perhaps to provide a few remarks as possible. The theme of transcendence came through very strongly today, and from Thomas's remarks, from Barker's earlier remarks, and David's as well. The importance of thinking that what we're doing here is a challenge. It's not just cross-cutting in terms of sectors, talking of if it's within the blue economy, ideas around sustainable tourism, or what the future of shipping and new ideas for shipping will be. But Ahmad, things like energy, fisheries as a sustainable livelihood, and across countries as well. So the conversation is always going to be a challenge, but that's a challenge is not a bad thing in this regard, because as we heard earlier, in fact, in terms of from Thomas, the small groups of people, this is how change happens. But the second part is, Barker said horizontal, and that's what I mean by those sectors, the vertical side, and that's not just between multiple levels of the absolutely essential bottom-up perspectives and movement of new groupings or expansion of groupings of people and ideas which propel upwards in the policy agenda, but also thinking vertically in a sense of between generations, the intergenerational gap. Obviously a very, very sort of complicated seascape or sea space that we're working in, and sandwiched, I think, is very just good to note as well that yesterday being the day commemorating the fight against illegal fishing and World Environment Day, and with World Ocean Day coming up, as well as in South Africa, Youth Day on the 16th of June. This is an absolutely sort of key time when, certainly in the public mind, when we try and battle ideas of sea blindness and the unfortunate ambivalence of many people towards either ideas and innovation coming from youth, but also ideas and innovation required for the seas, that this is an absolutely fundamental time. The youth have been, in terms of incorporation and inclusivity, often been taken for granted, as we heard David say, in terms of strategies, and many of these strategies do require revision. The African Union's integrated maritime strategy, among others, is very well out of date now, and there is a time coming up for certain to harness and to help through efforts such as today bring ideas into those negotiation forums as well. Khalkhelo made a great point about effectively how the youth of yesterday are the leaders of now, of today, and they need to be looking and realizing that the leaders of tomorrow are with us right now, and we are providing those kind of, when I say we, all of us here, providing that space. And Sam's a great presentation and shining a spotlight, I think, in particular on how processes have gone within South Africa and providing examples. We're very grateful for those efforts, because I think what those efforts have done have provided, have enabled others to then carry forward as well, to take examples and practices, and to then catalyze and enable others as well. It's very exciting. And from the conversations, and I did promise I'd be brief, I know, but from the conversations that I've been following this morning, as well as I believe what I can see to be a real interest in people in engaging with this after the event, that it will have achieved a lot. And in that regard, as I say, transcend many of the kind of blue borders which exist, not just between countries, but in our minds and in the minds of others, which we're trying to encourage and find innovative ways around. The final thing I think I just want to add is that the conversations today, as was spoken at the beginning, are being captured in an outcomes report, which we could call an anchoring report, which would really, like I say, help in whatever way it can, and to be used by you all, and to help facilitate and catalyze efforts to improve the inclusivity of youth voices in policy processes, but also I think to grow, because there are so many voices, so many perspectives, so many people who have yet to be engaged, or we just haven't engaged yet. Maybe it's a problem of language sometimes, or like I say, a generational gap and assumptions, which we are challenging. I'm very confident that we can look on today and other events as really making a milestone effort in that. With that, thank you for letting me provide some final remarks. I'd like to hand back to the chair, and thank you all for attending.
Oh, thank you so much, Timothy. We really appreciate and honor your closing remarks, and of course, the remarks and the presentations from all the colleagues from the from Youth for MPAs, from the UNDP, from COMESA, and then also from the former Peace and Security Youth Ambassador of the AU, Cynthia. Honestly, we do really honor that, and of course from David and the colleagues from ISS, and we're really looking forward to see how best, just like the way Tim said, revise the strategies that we do have. You know, we have good examples, even the African. He mentioned about the maritime strategy. I'm also acquainted to the biodiversity strategy of the African Union, which is still in drafting, and you know how best we can actually push these voices forward and have the youth at the center of the strategies and discussion. And now I think I'll be taking it back to my main moderator, Denise, to close the session.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think, yeah, this was a great conversation, and I then close this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the IUCN, for working with us.